Welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show, Defying Gravity so your team can soar at altitude, with host Marshall Goldsmith, Executive Coach, Randy Swaim. Well, hello. This is Marshall Goldsmith, Certified Executive Coach, and just wanting to welcome the listeners to the podcast, the Organizational Maneuverability Podcast for our show. As you know, it kind of focuses on leadership and developing people to be successful in rapidly changing environments that maybe are not just road academic. And so honored to have you on there. And I'll tell you what, I'm very honored to have Justin on our show as a guest today. And forgive me, I'll let you kind of nod if I get the name right, but it's Morigeau?
Morigeau.
Morigeau. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. There you go.
yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
So Justin, it's nice to have you on here. And
Thank
I'll
you.
tell you what, just for the folks here that are listening and all, why don't you take just a couple of minutes and just introduce yourself a little bit so they know who the guest is.
All right, Randy, first, thank you for having me on your podcast.
My pleasure, man.
Also, thanks for your 15 plus years of service with the Armed Forces. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Again, Justin Morigeau. Right now, I'm the president of Aerotech. We are a boutique company that does design, build, test, fly of anything you can imagine, drones
Wow.
to clean sheet design. So,
Wow.
we're based in Seattle, Washington. That's where our headquarters is. And I'm actually based in Moses Lake. That's where our flight test center is. So that's where I call home. It's a large airfield here. We have 180,000 square feet of hangar space. Pretty proud of it. And it's a great company. Work with a lot of great customers, everything from DoD to NASA to private clients. So that's what I do for a day job. And my history, it's interesting. I'm not your typical, let's say, president of an aerospace company, because I don't really have that. I'm not an aerospace engineer by trade. And, I grew up in the industry. I grew up on Boeing paychecks. The holidays, which we just got done with, were often like board meetings of Boeing, because my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, mom, dad, all worked for Boeing. And and as I look back on that, at the time, I didn't appreciate that. But where I'm at today, I actually leverage a lot of that experience.
Cool.
And so growing up, I was like, you know what? Grew up in aviation, grew up on the south end of Boeing Field for a while. And I was like, you know what? I need to go out on my own. So did my undergrad in a field called hydrogeology. Wanted to do computational ground modeling.
Mm-hmm.
Got out of school, went to a company called URS in Denver, Colorado. Great experience. And then I found myself falling into project management. Did a little bit of the technical work, but got pulled into the project management rank, which really kind of set the foundation from where I'm at today.
Okay.
And then from that company, did my MBA at University of Colorado and did that full time while I was working full time. So that was good work-life balance there, but able to get that done. And, my wife and I, we had our first kiddo in Denver, and we moved back to Washington State to be closer to family. And when I moved back to Washington, lo and behold, the company that I was trying to avoid, I ended up at, and that was the Boeing company.
Wow. Yeah.
And, what's funny is I joined the Boeing company and I started on the 767 program. And history of the 767 program, that program was launched on the exact day and year I was born, July 14th.
Oh, wow.
July 14th, 1978. So that is so it was kind of like one of these little, cues that maybe that was the thing to do, right?
Sometimes there's factors that really prepare us that we're not even aware of at the time.
Right.
You never know.
Yep. So spent almost 10 years at Boeing, and to be honest, it was an amazing 10 years. A lot of growth. Boeing does a really good job of training their people. Sure, there's negative press out there, et cetera, but they do a really good job of training their people. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough, with a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, a go-get kind of spirit, if there was opportunity, you just had to go find it and go do that.
Yeah.
And so I was able to progress through that organization fairly quick.
Hmm.
Um, Ended up working for a gentleman named Pat Shanahan. He actually became the acting Secretary of Defense under Trump.
Uh-huh.
He was a Boeing executive. I learned a lot from him, and I actually learned that my leadership style was fairly similar to his, pretty nonlinear,
Yeah.
fairly abstract. And I latched onto that, and I learned a lot from that. After Boeing, I got recruited by a company called Greenpoint, a small boutique custom aircraft company that does Boeing aircraft, amazing aircraft. And to be honest, that was where there was a major step function on leadership for me. I had a
Okay.
good foundation coming out of Boeing, and then got hired by Greenpoint. And there, instead of having the kind of slivers of responsibility, I had a whole basket of responsibility.
Okay.
And that really progressed. I was hired as a program manager there, worked on some amazing projects all over the world. Then got into the kind of organizational leadership at Greenpoint. I became a VP of production for the company. And then just about a year and a half ago, I got approached by Aerotech. Lee Human, the owner of Aerotech, approached me. We happen to be right next door, and I've known Lee for 5 years. And he's like, "Hey, I really need you to come and help lead this
Hmm.
company."
Yeah.
And it was a hard move because I really enjoyed Greenpoint. I still have a close knit family there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like I felt like I set it up for success and was ready for the next challenge. And so that's where I'm at today. And so that's the journey kind of packed
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
46 years there. So,
Well, I'll tell you, you have my compliments on that, and something that you said pointed out there is exactly true. It's been true in my journey, and let's face it, it's true in all of our journeys. It's just the process of development. We don't even know it's happening half the time in our
right.
journey, but it truly is, and that's just a key point on that as you're talking about. So that is cool.
Yeah.
So well, I'll tell you what, you have my compliments on your journey and
Thank
all
you.
of it that you just shared. Let me ask you this just real quick. Well, not real quick. We'll talk about it for a little bit, but uh, why don't you kind of share with the listeners kind of what you want to bring to the program today, to the podcast? I know that there's a couple of central concepts and themes you want to bring, and they're applicable to organizational maneuverability situations and everything. So I'll just kind of let you share and introduce and begin sharing with it.
Okay, great. Yeah. So what's interesting, as I mentioned at the beginning, what's interesting about my background is I'm in aviation, president of a aerospace company, but I'm not an aerospace engineer.
Uh-huh.
I'll say I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, as far as my technical skills and capabilities. But
Yeah.
over the years, I'm trying to figure out, like, even my wife goes, I don't even know what he does, right? and and I boiled it down to, like, being labeled as kind of the fix it guy, a guy that can
Yeah.
come in and fix things. And then also, if you, for some of us, you have to kind of go way back. The old AT&T switchboard operators, where they would move the calls, with the plugs
Yeah.
and make sure people were coordinated and connected.
Hmm.
Um, I see that as an area that I kind of fell into, really ensuring alignment and coordination of people, of organizations, of departments.
Hmm.
And so the two areas is I've always found myself kind of finding myself in areas of chaos, being brought into areas of chaos. Hey, we need to triage something. We have a program that's off the rails, or we have a department that's off the rails, or a business unit, or whatever it is, and we need
Yeah.
to fix it.
Can,
And
can you share one example? You don't have to share any names or any company names or anything like that, but just kind of the picture of perhaps one situation where you had to come in with that.
yeah, so there's many, and I'll go back for this one. I'll go back to my Boeing days. Okay,
Okay.
so without kind of disclosing IP type information,
Right.
there was a new airplane was being developed, and configuration management was we'll say it was a challenge. And even with robust systems and whatnot, the problem was there was too much change management, hard to manage.
Thank you.
And the other part too was there was too many people involved with the whole process. And it's kind of like if you have a lot of people involved with something, people start creating their own stuff, and there's not a systematic or standard process. So
Mhm.
I was
Good point.
brought into that situation to one, trim down change and get it funneled back to the standard systems to manage configuration of the production. And that took about 6 months. And what it
Mhm.
was is like we could debate all day long, right? We could go, oh, we need to do this system, we need to do this. It's like, no, we gotta like lop it off. It's kind of like trimming a fruit tree. You
Yeah.
gotta you gotta cut the branches off sometimes so it can blossom. And
Mhm.
so we ended up cutting off a lot of like avenues of change, like
Mhm.
things that weren't necessary to build the aircraft. And so that was one of the biggest things, and did that in about a 6 month stint. It was actually right before I left Boeing to go to Greenpoint, and
Uh-huh.
that was a major shift for that program, and it was able to get it stabilized enough to not just get aircraft that had on paper met what it was built to, but also allowed production rates to increase,
Yeah.
allowed stability with the workforce, morale improved. Just these little tiny tweaks, nothing big, nothing. It was just getting things streamlined,
Mhm.
reducing change avenues that were there. So that's probably an early example in my career where we had an influence on taking a bit of a chaotic situation, getting it triaged, stable. The patient's stable now, and now
Mhm.
we can hand it off to the recurring team to get it continued production. So,
And you have you brought out a very good point on that, because when you're talking about change and adaptive behaviors, that, let's face it, and you kind of implied this, yeah, there's times where that's very important and very critical, because guess what, not everything fits academic. But
no,
on the other hand, and what you just implied here is, do you understand where that's really getting you towards success, or is it distracting? Is
right,
it, and those are two key aspects in a vision clarity and in a strategic vision clarity,
right,
that you got to have access to, and have, there's some times where you do need to adapt, but maybe a smaller level than what you were thinking of at the first,
right.
and all that. So all of that is, when you're talking about organizational maneuverability and everything, that's what you just shared, is kind of one example of that. So yeah, I'll let you go ahead and continue then. And that just that's what stood out to me and what you were
Yeah.
just describing. So cool.
Yeah. Here's another good example. When I was at Greenpoint, it's a project. These companies that I've worked at are pretty much project-based companies.
Yeah.
Even Boeing, yes, it's a production company, but it's still a project-based company.
Yep.
And project-based companies are interesting because you have things that ebb and flow. They're in different stages. They're in an engineering state, and then they go into a procurement state, and then they go into manufacturing, blah blah blah. And at Greenpoint, what we had some amazing program managers, like phenomenal program managers, and I was fortunate to work with them, be part of that team, work with them, learn
Yep.
from them. But one of the things that I found interesting on program is, especially like, programs can be long in duration, they could be
Yeah.
like 18, 24 months.
Hmm.
And when you're going, you know, you're cranking out the hours, sometimes like you get burned out,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
you get, like, and you need like a reliever. And it's interesting because programs, you always have this kind of starting, initiating phase,
Hmm.
right? Then you have like this middle phase, and then you have the closing phase. And I actually, like, I'm a baseball guy, so I kind of looked
Oh,
at them.
okay. Cool. I
I,
played a lot of that in my years. Yep.
and and I coach it. It's one of my favorite sports to coach.
Oh
So
well,
like,
you have my compliments.
and I look at programs as kind of like a baseball game. You got a starting pitcher, you got a middle reliever, and you got a closer.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'm not a good starting pitcher. I'm not. Like,
Yeah.
starting pitchers get the program started, get the master schedules, all that stuff. You know, really good standard process stuff, right?
Yep.
And then you get into, like, it starts getting a little messy in the middle, and you bring in your middle reliever. It's still kind of in development. Still, things are generally on the tracks, but then you get to the back end of the program where the product is being built. It's being put together from paper to actual hardware, and things don't match up, and the customer's getting, excited, and,
Yeah.
costs are in. And so I found myself always kind of coming in at that stage on a program.
Cool.
And
Cool.
and it again, I love the words triage, because the first thing was, okay, what's hemorrhaging? What needs to be, clamped off first?
Yeah.
Then get it stable enough. But it wasn't just survivability, is we wanted the program to have a full recovery.
Yeah.
And so I would be brought into, like, those type of situations, not just at Greenpoint, but other places too. But that's where I felt myself thrive. And so it came up with this idea. Why this is, most programs have kind of this linear approach. And when I say I have this nonlinear
Yeah.
abstract thinking, why not have a starting pitcher to get the program off the deck? Have a middle reliever to kind of take some of that burden off that starting pitcher, but then bring in a closer to get it done. And it's just, when we talk about, organizational dynamics, and program leadership, there's a lot of efficiency there. If you take that approach, and you maximize the strengths of certain individuals, right? Like I mentioned, I'm not a good starting pitcher, because as much as I follow process and stuff, I hate process. I like fixing things, and then we'll get the process in place. But there's others that are really strong at that. So, like I mentioned, I would say one of those primary areas that I've been heavily kind of gravitated to or pulled into are those chaotic triage type of situations. Or maybe it's not so much the patient's dying, it's more like, hey, we can do better. And I look at my current company, Aerotech, and the position I'm in, the phenomenal company. And it was like, okay, how do we take it from where we're at today to the next level? So it wasn't necessarily a triage situation, but it was like, hey, we need to have kind of a different thought process here to how to get us to the next stage. And
to get to true success.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one area. The other area that I find myself really focused on, which I mentioned earlier, is alignment and coordination. And if I look in my toolbox of things, which is a small toolbox, by the way, and I reach in there and I go, okay, how do we get, I'm not doing the work. I'm not designing the drawing. I'm not procuring parts. I'm not setting up the CNCs to cut the parts and put them on, or flying the aircraft. That's not my job. But it requires everything in between to be coordinated and aligned. So when I reach in that toolbox, I go, okay, how do we get from A to B? And what's the journey there? And as I mentioned earlier, nonlinear abstract thinker, I'm not going and looking at like a Gantt chart of like waterfalls of activities. I'm looking at like big rocks and pieces, and keeping the overall map at a high level understood, but not just for me, because I'm not the person putting it. The team needs to know what that is, right?
That's right.
They got to understand. Okay, if I miss deliverables here, and here, then it impacts that next operation's ability to deliver. And it's a mindset change, right? moving from a siloed organization to a value stream. Like you flip it on its side and you go, let's focus on the product, not the department.
Yeah.
And that's a complete, sometimes people don't understand that, or
You're
maybe
right.
value that as much. But that is like for project-based companies, you have to have that mindset.
Yeah.
The next operation is highly dependent on me handing the baton off. Like
Yeah.
you can look at a relay race, right? In fact, I was
Yeah.
watching a video the other day where this team was on pace for a world record time, and one slip, the baton didn't hit the ground, but one slip, it slowed it down by like a tenth or 100th of a second, enough to not get there, right? And it's how do you make sure that doesn't happen? That is one of my, like, where I focus on is ensuring alignment and coordination across the organization.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, just to throw a question out, which is
Yep.
very aligned with what you were just kind of saying there just a second ago. What do you think keeps, because the point that you're bringing, I think, is very critical when you're talking about unpredictable, unexpected, changing environments and stuff.
Yep.
Not everything is road academic, but
Right.
what keeps people from being as successful with kind of what you're talking about? Because I think that there's a couple of things that are in my mind. In your mind, what are some of the things that keeps people from doing that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I had a conversation Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was, just a couple days ago,
prior to today.
prior to today, about this topic. And when I look at, companies like where I'm at now, Greenpoint, and other companies, a lot of these companies start out as something small, right?
Yep.
And like often it's a niche thing, and then they get really good at that niche thing, and then they like start building other capabilities, other things, and oftentimes you have a deep line. You have a lot of people that they were on the ground floor when that thing started.
Yeah.
And which is good because you have the pedigree, you have the history, you have the IP of that. But as you start adding these things along a journey, it's a human nature to like revert back to what you know really well, where you started.
Bingo. That's
Right?
kind of where I was thinking. Yeah, keep going.
And so it's, hey, even though we've added this, I'm still this is where I'm focused. And then new people come in, right?
Yep.
And they're going, well, how come we don't do it like this? Like I come from this environment and we do it like this. Well, there's still this mindset like at ground zero.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that, we spend a lot of time on. Where I spend my time on is taking people on that journey. Okay, awesome. This is where we start. We have to protect that.
Yeah.
So we're here today, and we either have to make a decision. Do we want to be there? And if so, here's the changes that have to happen. If we don't, and we just want to do this, then let's get rid of all that and just focus here. And that's it's just being objective, right? You're trying not to like, isolate people, but you also have to, it's also business too. Like, it has to work. So,
and it's interesting with what you said there is correct, because you know what? Some of the new people that come in to kind of have some application within this desire, within this goal, guess what? They may have some insights that not everybody else does.
Right. Yep.
And they may have a picture that leads to success that nobody else did yet. Now, doesn't mean that they do, but they could, they might. And one of the things you have to realize, and it's kind of what you were sort of implying there, is that when you're talking about true synergy, it doesn't mean everybody in your team is exactly the same. No, they're not.
Right.
And they're not meant to be. And like you said, so a key part of this is the lack of vision in the people. If they're just going with rote academic, well, we're supposed to do it this way. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Now, guess what? If law is involved, you may have to kind of do a little bit of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But apart from that, when you're talking about taking your team there, sometimes you got to kind of look at it. Okay, you know what? Some of this is out of the sort of the central thought on that. You know what can we do on that? How are we going to do
Yeah.
that? And you start really developing that as you go forward. And you kind of mentioned it with the 3 levels
Yeah.
as you go. And leaders, you need to kind of be able to develop your team in such a way that they can kind of see those enhanced, uh, uh, you know, uh, aspects for success that you didn't realize. And guess what? At the end of it all, when your boss comes in and goes, "Wow, I didn't expect this. How'd you guys? Wow, how'd you do this?
Right.
Wow." You know what? Everybody gets applauded, and kind of thing. It's not just rote academic things, and that is for sure. And so it's just something to think about with that. And it's what you're talking about is very key as leaders, regardless of which level we're operating in on there. Are you really developing your people? And you kind of implied this, Justin. Are you really developing yourself
Right.
for that vision and having a true vision and the strategic awareness of the vision of how we can tweak the plan a little bit? And what are we going to watch out for and things of that nature? All of that really sort of comes into play on that. So
Right.
it's very, very a key part when you're talking about organizational maneuverability.
Yep.
And so I'll tell you what, we're coming up on about 4 minutes before
Okay.
the end of the podcast. So let me just take a minute and just let you bring anything that you want to close with, anything on that you want to close with. It's been an honor to have you on the show, Justin, and I appreciate what you brought. But yeah, just take about a couple of minutes or whatever, and bring whatever you want to bring to maybe conclude or
Okay.
kind of bring to the finish line.
All right. Yeah. So I was kind of thinking about this, especially over you go back and look at my career.
Mhm.
And when I take on a new role, either internally with the company or I move companies, you really got to put your ego piece aside. You got to go, okay, yeah,
Yep.
I have all that experience, I have this education, whatever. You got to put that aside, and you got to spend. I always tell
You have
people,
my compliments on what you just said. You're
all
right.
right,
Keep
and
going.
I so I tell people when I come into the organization, I might be quiet at first, but I'm in observation mode for 30 days. I always give myself 30 days to understand the dynamics of the organization and understand the nuts and bolts of the organization. Understand, what do we do? Like, what is it we make? What is it we deliver? What do we, is it a service, product? Like, trying to understand all the elements that make up that organization before trying to implement change or
Yeah,
my view or whatever. Because if you come in like a bull in a china shop, you're not going to make friends real quick. And
that's right. That's right.
and and so that what I counsel or coach people on doing is, when you move to that next level, you move to a new organization, a new department, spend some time to understand what they do. And then you can start assessing what needs to be done. And when you start assessing what needs to be done, the first thing you should do is ask the people, not yourself. So you go
Mhm.
out and
Yep.
you go, okay, well, what's working, what's not? Real simple tools. You don't need any fancy systems or anything like that. This is just human contact, human conversation, some basic surveys if you want to do that for a larger group. And take that in
Yep.
and start like building those relationships. I look back again at my career, and everything I feel like I've been successful in is highly dependent on the ability to quickly develop relationships, having a clear vision, like, hey, here's my vision of what I see this organization can do with you, not me, with you.
Mhm.
And what do you guys think? Yes, no, maybe. What would you change differently? And it goes a long way. And I look back and my measure stick on this isn't titles, isn't positions, it isn't all that. It's like, how many people am I closely friends with? I look back at my Boeing days. I have close friends still from Boeing.
Yeah.
Greenpoint. One of my best friends is from my days at Greenpoint.
Yeah.
And even today, like my relationships at Aerotech are huge because it's a focus on the relationships. So that's what I would how I would summarize or recommend to
and I'll just kind of share this with you. You have my compliments on that, because what you just described is the coaching leadership approach, where you're connecting with your people and
Right.
you're not playing dictatorial games.
Right.
And all of that is so key when you're talking about leading your team and success in an unpredictable environment.
Yep.
And so, like I say, you just have my compliments on that. And I'll tell you, we're basically about out of time here. So I just wanted to say I appreciate what you brought today, Justin. You have my compliments on your journey and who you are and how you got here.
All right.
And it's been an honor to have you on the show today.
All
So
right.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate it, and I hope you have a good rest of 2025.
All right. Thank you,
But
Randy. Appreciate the time. So.
and maybe we'll look forward to being on a show again. So
Yeah,
listen, I hope you have a great one. Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.